Okay, this is part 3 of chapter 13. Now we're moving up to the part where the contract has been made and the parties are in the process of executing the contract, that is, completing the contract. We call this performance and discharge. The most common way to discharge or terminate a contractual duties is by performance of those duties. Okay? A party's obligation to perform can also be discharged in other ways, such as by agreement. We have situations sometimes where a contract is not completely performed, and then the question is, what do we do about that? And that's what we're going to be talking about in part 3 video. Okay? So first of all, let's talk about conditions. Conditions are a qualification in a contract based on a possible future event. It's an occurrence or a non-occurrence that will trigger the performance of a legal obligation or terminate an existing obligation under the contract. If the condition is not satisfied, the obligations of the party are discharged. So if you hire somebody to paint your house and the agreement says that they're going to paint the house for X amount of dollars and you're going to provide the paint, and you never provide the paint, then that condition is not satisfied and the obligations of the parties may be discharged. Discharge can also be by performance. This is the hopefully normal situation in most contracts where both parties fulfill their respective duties by performing the acts that they have promised. In this situation, virtually nothing happens at that point. Contract's fulfilled, everybody goes their separate ways. Tender of performance is a situation where there's an unconditional offer to perform. Okay, there's two basic types of performance: complete performance and substantial performance. In complete performance, the parties perform exactly as agreed and all conditions are satisfied. That discharges the parties from the contract. It's what I was talking about a minute ago. Everybody goes their separate ways. Normally, all the conditions in a contract have to be performed in order to meet complete performance. But there can also be substantial performance. This is a situation where one of the parties, in good faith, performs substantially all of the terms of the contract, and the contract can therefore be enforced. Most of the benefits are conferred but the promise or the performance cannot vary greatly from what was promised. So if you hire somebody to paint your house, to paint your house outside, and they paint the entire outside except they forget to do one of the doors, that is substantial performance. In that situation, the party performed in good faith, did not vary greatly from the performance promised in the contract, and substantially the same benefits as were promised in the contract actually occurred. In this situation, it's up to the courts to decide whether or not there was substantial performance and whether or not to order continual performance or to provide damages. In that situation, the measure of damages is the cost of bringing the object of the contract into compliance with the terms. In other words, how much is it going to cost to get somebody else to paint that door? If it's not a reasonable amount, then the other measure of damages is the difference between the value between the performance rendered and complete performance of the contract. In other words, how much would somebody have been paid to paint the whole house less that one door versus how much would have been cost to paint the whole house plus the door. Those two things are, one is subtracted from the other to get the measure of damages. Okay. Most contracts only need to be performed to the satisfaction of a reasonable person, unless a higher standard is stated. So quality can be an issue. It needs to be put in the contract. If it's not put in the contract, then it's a reasonable person standard. Okay, what about a material breach of contract as opposed to what we were just talking about, which was substantial performance? A material breach is one that is not substantial compliance. Material versus minor breach. If it's a minor breach, again, we go back to whether or not it's substantial performance. And in that case, the non-breaching party's duty to perform can be suspended until the breach has been remedied according to what we already talked about. Okay, so we already talked about that. When it's complete breach of the contract, then we have a damage situation. And the party can sue for damages. Only a material breach then allows the non-breaching party to get out from under the contract and sue for damages. Now we have a situation that is called anticipatory repudiation. Anticipatory repudiation is a situation where one party during the execution of the contract refuses to carry out their contractual obligations. It's treated as a material breach and allows the non-breaching party to sue for damages immediately, even though performance may not be due yet. In other words, if you have a contract to build a room to your house, an addition to your house, if the person who is building that stops in the middle of the building, but intends to continue and perform, you may not have a breach at that point, and you may not be able to sue. However, if the person says to you, I do not intend to complete this project, I have another project worth more money to me, you need to get somebody else to finish, then that's an anticipatory breach, and you don't have to wait until the deadline for building that room has come and gone to sue. You can sue at the time of the anticipatory breach. Okay, so we're going to move on to part 4 next. Remember again, the magic word for chapter 13 is fraudulent.